Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today for the launch of the inaugural Awin Report. I'm going to welcome, obviously, you guys here in the London office, but obviously we're also joined by those of you that are streaming this live via Facebook. And just to give you a heads up about what to expect for today, this itself is the Awin Report, and you'll be able to receive a copy of this at the end of the event. I think we're going to dot them around the tables, which are just in the middle of the room there on your way out. For those of you that aren't obviously in the office, a digital copy will be made available from around 5 p.m. I think this afternoon. So pretty much just at the end of when the presentation or our presentation is actually finished. If you've got any questions at all for both my content or our content, and also our guest speaker, Sri Sharma, who's also a contributor to the Awin Report. He's going to be presenting from about 5 o'clock UK time. So if you've got any questions for either of those presentations, then do save them for the end. And we've got a colleague with a mic who's going to be roaming around taking your questions, and we'll look to answer those subsequently. So to kick things off, I think I should probably explain the idea behind the Awin Report itself. This, as I said, is the inaugural edition of this, and we're hoping to produce an updated version every year subsequently for the rest of my life. And so the idea is that we've never really had, I don't think any of the networks or anyone within the industry has really kind of produced anything like this, a definitive guide to the global affiliate industry before. And I think partly that's because it's quite a fragmented market, or that's the perception at least anyway. When you compare it to the likes of other kind of global marketing, online marketing forms like Google or Facebook, it's a fairly universalized, standardized format that can be translated into a lot of those local territories without too much of a kind of adaptation to the local market and the particular context of that e-commerce environment. Whereas with affiliate marketing, it does tend to be something that is made up of the constituent parts of those local territories, and which is derived from the particular affiliates that operate in those regions themselves. And that was certainly the case when we were researching the content for this report, and we found that there are obviously a hell of a lot of local nuances and differences that need to be kind of considered if you're approaching and looking to break into those markets. However, there are also a lot of similarities and a lot of patterns and trends that are emerging globally speaking, and that you can definitely see within each of those markets kind of mirroring each other. And so that's why the report is essentially split into two parts. In the first half, you'll find 11 different chapters that are focused on each of Awin's regional territories, and we go into more detail around the particular circumstances that the affiliate markets there have arisen out of, giving you kind of wider context on e-commerce in all of those different territories from North and South America, Asia Pacific, and also throughout Europe as well, obviously. And the second half of the report actually focuses on 7 of those key themes that we've identified as coming out of each of those markets and that seem to mirror each other a lot. So I'm going to hand over to Kevin Edwards, who's our global client strategy, or just global strategy, whatever, global strategy director. And he's going to touch on the first few of those particular themes, and then I'll come back and finish off. Do you want this?
I'm all right. I've seen it. Thanks, Rob. So as Rob says, this is the first time we've done something like this. For the purposes of today, we've only got about 25 minutes, so obviously we can't do justice to everything that's in the report. But what I would suggest is if any of the topics that we talk about on a very top level basis are of interest to you, then please do look at each of the chapters. What we've done is try to go out and source information at a local level. We've got interviews in there, we've got data from the network, and we try and draw some conclusions, and we try and hopefully stimulate some debate in there, which hopefully will feed into conversations that you have. So without further ado, so just presumably if you're watching, you know who Awin is, but just in case you don't know who we are, we rebranded in March under a global brand of Awin, maybe more familiar as Affiliate Window in the UK or US, or Xanox on continental Europe. As you can see, we work with about 6,000 advertisers across the world, and there's a selection of our brands and the revenue that we generated for those advertisers. So when we went out and tried to understand some of the commonality within the industry, what we found was that there were certain topics that resonated. So we went and spoke to representatives in each of the markets. And actually what we're finding is some of those conversations are more mature than others. But typically one that we're increasingly seeing is in the voucher code space. But before I come to talk about that, I just wanted to touch on some of the revenue that we're seeing. So there is no global picture around the scope and the scale and the size of the affiliate industry. However, there are individual bits of data that exists. Unfortunately, there's kind of no consistent standard how that data is actually sourced. So in the US, it's done kind of a modeled format. In the UK, it's a combination of modeling and also submitted data. In some markets, it's a very narrow focus. In the UK, it's quite broad. We have a UK report that's updated annually, and that's probably the most comprehensive one that's out there. And it won't come as any surprise that the US is the largest market, but actually proportionally the UK and some very recent data that we got from Germany after not having any data from Germany for a number of years showed that actually proportionally they're bigger probably per head than actually the US market. And then we have some smaller countries by revenue, but as I mentioned, they probably focus in a lot more narrowly around what is considered the scope of affiliate marketing. The one area that's really difficult to model up is beyond that, so the rest of the world data. We came to a conclusion that looking at the next biggest markets, so effectively looking at 99% of digital marketing spend, we came to the conclusion that overall the rest of the world was probably worth around about 4 billion euros, which gives us a total estimated global value in terms of spend in commission and fees being spent on affiliate marketing around about 12 billion. The one ROI figure that we are able to get that seemed quite definitive is from a UK perspective, where the OPM, the Online Performance Marketing Study, concludes that for every £1 that's spent on affiliate marketing, advertisers can expect to receive about £12.30 in revenue. So some really good ROI figures behind that as well. So come on to talk about the topics now. Then one of the topics that really does resonate when we go out and talk to our colleagues in local markets is the voucher code space. So this is a question that anyone that works in the space for a period of time, and anyone that's worked with voucher codes has probably either been asked or has asked. And essentially this point and the following point that I'm going to come on to talk about are kind of premised and based around the ability to track information, the ability to track additional data points. So what they kind of represent is the next stage of affiliate marketing, the stage of affiliate marketing that I think a lot of us are transitioning to. Some of us have already transitioned and have been for a number of years. And it's where we need to act more coherently as a business and an industry to ensure that we're increasing standardization around the data that we capture. Now, there are inherent issues around what we constitute as incremental, which I'll come on to talk about in a second. But just to give you some context as to looking at our global data, the volume of voucher code affiliates that consider themselves to be discount or coupon-based sites. So in 2016, you can see that more than 1/3 of our top 100 revenue-driving affiliates consider themselves to be in that space. Now that in itself, as anyone who's worked in the industry for a period of time will tell you, is difficult to contextualize because just because we have dedicated voucher code portals, it doesn't mean that they're the only ones driving sales from voucher codes. In the report, we talk about, we give two examples of a content curation affiliate with an app who is very much kind of early funnel, exploratory traffic, discovering new brands and new products. And yet, when we look at the redemptions around their sales, more than 1/3 of their sales are actually coming as a result of voucher code redemption. So that's a very sizable amount of revenue they're generating, but you wouldn't necessarily consider them to be a voucher code site. Also, when we looked at one of our major voucher code affiliates, we found that fewer than half of their sales, just under half, were actually as a result of a voucher being redeemed. So they're clearly doing things beyond just voucher redemption. So beyond the obvious difficulties there are within the industry around trying to contextualize and trying to create standardization around the affiliates that we identify based on their traffic, What other things should we be looking at in order to measure what is incremental? Well, incremental can mean different things to different people, different sectors, different businesses. But typically one of the things that we're often challenged on is the percentage of new versus existing customers that are being driven through voucher code sites. Now, each of these metrics that I talk about, all of the data that we're talking about, in isolation, one individual piece of data isn't necessarily particularly useful, but it's very much a layering process, trying to create something that's more three-dimensional. And when we looked at 5 retail clients across the network within the same sector, and we looked at their new versus existing data, because increasingly brands are starting to pass this back as a standardized metric, what we were able to conclude around voucher coding or couponing is that those sites were particularly good at driving incremental traffic if we take incremental to mean new customers, certainly compared to social media and certainly compared to editorial content as well. Now, that in itself doesn't provide, obviously, the whole picture. For the purposes of today, we can't go into any more detail on that issue, but it kind of feeds into the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about today, which is around delivering lifetime value through affiliates and through affiliate marketing. So this is a topic that, again, we know that we get challenged on all the time at Awin, and it's something that we've invested very heavily in over the years. And I'd like to think that as a network, we've been the most forward-thinking in terms of trying to capture more data and trying to tell stories around the data. And to kind of evolve the previous point, it very much is the stage of affiliate marketing that we find ourselves in at the moment, where we're moving from just measuring the volume of sales, the value of sales that's being delivered, to look at something that's more three-dimensional and more qualitative, that focus in on that kind of slightly intangible concept of value. So one of the things that we're increasingly trying to do as a network is standardize how we track this data, because I mentioned it's really important for us to start capturing additional data points. We've sort of in the past made a rod for our own back in talking about how easy it can be to set affiliate programs up. Now, it can be if you're passing back some very basic data, but the more data you give us as a network, the more we're able to do with it. We recognize, obviously, there's a value exchange. We have to be able to demonstrate that if publishers and advertisers are passing us back more data, then we have an obligation to make sure that we're using it in a way that helps our clients to make more strategic and more kind of innovative and come up with more innovative solutions. So I've got an example here, which is in the travel sector. And these are just a few data points that you could pass us back, for example, if you're in the travel sector. And yet, historically, this hasn't necessarily been seen as standardized. So we've been moving towards trying to capture that data in less of an ad hoc way and in more of a standardized way. So we want to capture that data in the same format for as many clients as we can, because it isn't just about us being able to say to clients, here's your data. This enables you to make far more granular decisions. It enables us to tell better stories. It enables you to build individual marketing plans. It enables you to do better targeting and spend your money more wisely and give you confidence to invest in the channel more. It isn't just about that. It's about us being able to provide context as well. So if you're running something as an advertiser, what's the context for you against your competitors or within the sector that you operate? And if that data is passed back in a standardized way, then we're much better placed to be able to do that. So if you're interested in contacting us and finding out more about how you can pass that data back, if you're working with us, then we have a series of guides, a series of sector guides, then please do get in contact. So to evolve that even further, one piece of data that could be passed back, which in pre-GDPR times is still considered to be non-personalized data, is a customer ID. And if you pass back a customer ID, it actually becomes quite powerful what you can do with that information, because we can start to monitor things around lifetime value and lifetime contribution, frequency of purchase. And then again, layering that with additional data points around what's in the basket, we can start to model up what types of customers are being driven by different affiliates on your program. So in the example on the screen, you can see that we have some data here from a department store that wanted to extrapolate some findings from monitoring what sort of lifetime value or value over a 12-month period looked like. And I won't go into the detail. Again, all the details are in the report. But what they were able to do is they're able to layer this against all of their other channel data as well. But they're also able to look at the affiliate channel as a driver of initial interest and combine that with their other channel data to actually see how affiliate was able to drive lifetime value through other digital marketing channels they were using. And it's really only when we get to this stage where I think that we can start to make more strategic and involved and invested decisions, which then hopefully feeds into brand sort of confidence around investing in the channel longer term. And that concept of future-proofing takes me on to the next point, which is around brand safety and self-regulation, which is something that I've spent a lot of time on. It's something that doesn't necessarily always get people massively excited, but it is actually becoming increasingly important. And I'm not going to go into the details around GDPR, you'll be pleased to know. But essentially, with this point, what we mean is the ability of the industry to be able to self-regulate and recognize areas of self-regulation and areas that it needs to invest in to future-proof itself. Now, there are areas that we can focus in on. There are areas that we have very little control over that we have to react to. But actually, the industry's done a pretty good job in several of these areas. And so the example I wanted to flag up for the purposes of today is around some sort of local work that's happened in the UK, in Germany, and in the Netherlands as well around specific topics such as voucher coding, ethical approaches and transparent approaches to using different promotional methods. But also specifically within Germany, where there's quite a prescriptive but a really useful set of guidance around things like if tracking goes down and what compensation is due to affiliates and things like that. A set of guides that actually would probably be really welcome in a number of other countries. And I think for us as a global network, the largest global network that there is in the affiliate space, we recognize that we have an obligation here, and we want to understand what's happening in each of those markets and work collaboratively with other companies in those local markets to raise the standards for everybody and create this global framework. Now, these may be topics that actually don't resonate in certain markets, but it gives us the opportunity to get in there early and educate those markets and ensure that affiliates is considered to be both professional and mature enough to be able to regulate itself. Because if we don't regulate, then someone will regulate on our behalf. And actually on that point, it's something that we're increasingly seeing in the kind of this sort of growth of influencer marketing and content and social media. It's an area that lots of brands are chasing within the affiliate space. And that's great. It gives us the ability to talk about new opportunities, and it gives us the opportunity to diversify. But there are implications to that, and that we do have a care of duty to ensure that we're sticking to the rules. And what we're increasingly finding is the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, the FTC in the US, are increasingly being prescriptive around how affiliates, or more widely as they're considered influencers, have to actually provide disclosure and disclaimers around the commercial interests that they have behind their sites. And actually, it's a really interesting topic that we've kind of taken on board and that we're exploring internally. So on that point around influencers, I'm actually going to now hand over to Rob, who's going to cover off the remainder of the points that we cover off in the Awin Report.
So yeah, as Kevin mentioned, the fact that these regulatory bodies are taking into account a lot of the influencers now, and affiliate disclosure has been such a massive factor, particularly in the US and the UK. I think gives kind of wider recognition to the fact or the status of influencer marketing right now. Now, within the specific kind of context of affiliate marketing, it's something that we've definitely seen a real growth of across the whole kind of global network. Each of our local networks have seen kind of huge increases in what we might consider to be kind of social content affiliates. So those affiliates that are primarily using a social platform such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter to promote to brands and to use that as a means of promotion to their audiences. Because of that influx of interest, it's provoked a lot of debate within the wider industry around how that influence can be valued, how it can best be rewarded, and how the affiliate model has to necessarily evolve and adapt to accommodate where these affiliates tend to sit, which obviously tends to be as part of the traditional sales funnel further up, away from that all-important last click, which more incentive-based affiliates, kind of like the voucher code, the cashback affiliates, are gravitating towards more naturally anyway. And to get a better idea and to offer better insight into the discrepancy that currently exists within the industry between those particular types of affiliate, we took a look at the differences in performance and reward between what you might collectively call the incentive-based affiliates and those that we consider to be more social content. So just looking at from a traffic perspective, we saw that incentive affiliates were driving 2.5 times as many clicks, track clicks, than social content affiliates were. But you can see that the disparity starts to widen when you start to consider things like the conversions that are being driven off the back of that traffic. So 13 times as many sales were being driven by incentive affiliates than against social content. And that disparity widens even further when you're talking about the rewards that are being earned as well off the back of their efforts. So 24 times as much commission is being earned by those incentive affiliates than it is necessarily for the social content ones. And that, when you cost it all up, looks like an EPC, an earning per click rate, of 10 times as much for incentive affiliates versus those that are generating traffic off the back of their social profiles. And given the huge influx of interest that we've had from these influencers at the moment, it obviously means that it's something that definitely needs to be looked at from the industry in terms of offering them a viable means of an income for the effort and activity that they're driving, if they're going to make this a viable income for them long term. But obviously, influence isn't something that is exclusive to just influencers. And the report goes on to elaborate a little bit further and discuss more widely around what influence actually constitutes. Because when we consider the available traffic that comes from all of those affiliate types beyond just social content affiliates, there's an awful lot of a contribution that isn't being recognized and rewarded right now. When Awin actually rolled out their payment on influence tool, which allowed advertisers to reward certain affiliates for the contribution they might have made to a sale, even though they didn't necessarily provide that last all-important click, it was interesting to see that it wasn't just the conventional kind of bloggers and editorial content affiliates that were necessarily driving that influence. It kind of spread across all different types of publisher category. And it meant that we saw that incentive sites actually were driving an awful lot of value beyond just that last click. And when you think about it, if you look at the size of some of those incentive sites that are established brands within their own rights now and have huge audiences, not just in a conventional sense via their websites themselves, but on their social platforms where they have huge followings on Facebook and Twitter, for example, there's an awful lot of value that goes in there that isn't necessarily being rewarded in a conventional manner. The IAB's online performance marketing study that Kevin mentioned earlier, when you look at they totted up the amount of traffic that was being driven by affiliates and saw that over 5.5 billion clicks were being driven by affiliates, which converted into just 171 million transactions. And that amounts to almost 97% of that activity that isn't being rewarded in a conventional sense. So it's something that definitely needs to be improved upon. And I think that if it's going to be a viable income for all affiliates, then that has to be activity that is increasingly recognized. When you compare, for instance, how Google is currently being paid, I don't think they would accept that they wouldn't get paid for the clicks that they're sending through from paid search campaigns. When you compare it to the display channel where impressions are being paid for as a convention, it's a completely orthodox relationship there. In the affiliate channel, that's something that's just accepted that that value will be contributed by affiliates for free. Another section of the Awin report, which I think is inextricably kind of associated with the rise in influencer marketing, is the rise, obviously, of mobile and specifically of smartphone usage. The wider kind of adoption of smartphones around the world is something that we've seen, obviously, in all of those markets. And it is interesting to see how each of those have accommodated smartphone adoption within them. Excuse me. So we agreed from the very start of planning out the Awin report that we needed a chapter that focused specifically on the smartphone era and how that's radically changed the landscape as it currently exists from an e-commerce perspective. Just in the last year or so, in October last year, we saw mobile web browsing overtake desktop browsing for the very first time. It was really fascinating to see some of the insights actually in the research that has been currently done on smartphone usage right now. I think on average is around 3 hours per day that the average user is accessing the internet via their handsets. In Japan, there was a really quite strange statistic that we saw that around 90% of Japanese smartphones are waterproof because they're routinely used in the shower. Who knew that? And there's actually a term now, nomophobia, which refers to the sensation of fear that you feel when you don't have your smartphone on you. I definitely have felt that before. So one of the consequences of this mass adoption has been the device agnosticism that users tend to experience now when they're browsing the internet. So rather than just having a single journey using a single device, we necessarily wake up in the morning, you might research a product on your smartphone or be reading a piece of content on your smartphone or tablet. Later in the afternoon, you might be accessing it via your desktop. And that seamless journey from a user perspective is an incredibly difficult one for an affiliate network to track if we're going basing that on traditional cookie-based tracking technology. Awin responded to that in kind. Cross-device tracking is something that we've launched obviously for a number of years now and have built up a huge base of user profiles based on their associated owned devices. And that's helped us to kind of get a better insight into some of the cross-device journeys that are occurring with those consumers. This graph here just shows you the differences for one of the largest online retailers that we work with having switched on cross-device tracking. So the bars in grey show you the single device share of journeys by publisher type. And this is prior to cross-device tracking actually being turned on for that program. And the orange bars are showing you how the share of sales actually changed the publisher share of sales once that tracking was turned on. And as you can see, content, discount code, and particularly social traffic, which makes sense given, as we established earlier, a lot of that browsing is being done on a smartphone, perhaps earlier in the morning, and then journeys occurring later on different devices and then subsequently being tracked. And that's activity that would have been missed completely before cross-device tracking was made available to those affiliates. And it's completely reassessing the way in which we kind of view those affiliates and their contribution towards affiliate programs. So as smartphone adoption has proliferated around the world, so too has the importance of global retail events. And the outlier here is obviously Black Friday. And Black Friday has been a huge success as far as Awin's concerned right around the globe. But there are other examples of this. So currently we have China's Singles Day is starting to break out of its own domestic borders, and we're starting to see more success with brands utilizing events like this that have been adopted by foreign territories in terms of engaging users and accessing new customers in regions that they've not previously had activity in. Now, looking at the Black Friday 2016, this shows you the year-on-year revenue growth across the different Awin regions. Now you can see that the global average for 2016 versus 2015 was just over 50%. And there are a few countries that I find particularly interesting in this regard. The Netherlands saw over 170% increase on the previous year. And France too, although less than the global average, both the Netherlands and France have seen huge increases, and it last year really, I think, identified Black Friday as being an event that had become far more popular than it had ever previously kind of been acknowledged in France and the Netherlands. The US as well, I find quite surprising in this because obviously Black Friday originated there as an event, but because primarily it was seen as a traditional in-store event, shoppers were going into stores, getting the discounts there. I think the rise that we've seen from the States has been primarily because it's suddenly becoming much more of an e-commerce event, Amazon have popularized it around the world, and a lot of the American retailers, such as Target, Walmart, are starting to cotton on to the fact that online they've had an awful lot of success, and they're starting to replicate that for their own customers. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on emerging publishers and new technology. So we have a dedicated chapter that focuses on a selection of those affiliates from around the world that are really providing new and innovative means of engaging with new customers and consumers. I think that's something that is really characteristic of the affiliate market. I know from my own personal time working in the Publisher Services department here in the UK that we were inundated with new and innovative publisher opportunities every week. And it was something that was readily available to us with new businesses constantly coming in and pitching ideas that were going to disrupt the status quo as far as the affiliate world was concerned, and providing those new ways for advertisers to capture customers. We've picked out a few of those that we found particularly interesting at the moment. And just to highlight a couple of them, the unfortunately named Snatch are a mobile-based gaming app which provides a means of using augmented reality in much the same way as Pokemon Go, which was quite popular a few years ago. And the idea is that the users can tap into the game and they will then drop virtual parcels around the nearby location. You can then use your smartphone to capture those parcels, and if you can retain that parcel until the end of the day from competing players who are obviously trying to snatch it away from you, they can, if you manage to retain that gift, that will unravel itself to be a kind of mystery gift at the end of the day. So that ranges from everything from like an exclusive discount code from a brand that we're working with, all the way up to, I think they gave away like a brand new car or something last year, which obviously was a particularly happy moment for that player. Appiness are a app developer, and they have a new app called Spot, which in much the same way as Shazam is able to kind of recognize music for you via your smartphone, this actually recognizes TV programs that you might be watching. So it can synchronize with the television show that you're watching, and it can then provide you with recommendations of some of the clothing, for instance, that the actors within the actual TV show are wearing, and you can go and buy those items immediately from kind of within the app. Obviously, Game of Thrones could have a massive influence on what we're all wearing next year, which would be pretty weird. But I think that's one that's particularly quite interesting right now. And then finally, we've got so Shri Sharma, who's here and is our guest speaker today, and will be joining us shortly. His company is Increasingly, who've launched very recently, and they use machine learning to offer us facility very similar to Amazon's own bundling of products for brands, so that advertisers can offer the same facility of bundling up products for users within their own websites. And this has seen up to a 15% increase in the revenue that those advertisers have seen from sales occurring on their website. And they've already been nominated for, I think it was Best E-Commerce Technology Award, was it, for 2017? I can't actually see Shri, so. But yeah, they've been nominated for awards already for a particularly innovative technology platform that they're offering to advertisers now. So that's a kind of taster of what the Awin report actually involves and consists of. Like I said, you'll be able to pick up your copies on your way out today. And for those of you that are accessing this via online, if you go to awin.com/Awin report, you'll be able to download your copy, I think, now. So thank you for that. And I should say that Shri's going to join us now, and he's going to be talking a little bit. We've obviously focused very much on the affiliate industry and how that operates on a global scale. Shri's going to kind of take a backward step and show us a lot more about the kind of wider macro trends and the impact of innovation and technology in the future, and how that is going to influence the way that we shop and engage with e-commerce brands in the future.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name's Sri Sharma. I think the slides are still coming up. My name's Sri Sharma, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Increasingly. A little bit of my background, so you know. I've been in the internet world for a long time. I was one of the first users of Google AdWords. I built 2 technology businesses in the space. You probably know one of them called NMPI. I founded that business. I also work as part of an organization called Singularity University. It's a think tank that thinks about futuristic technology and its impact on society. And of course, buying is part of that, and I want to focus in on that area. So today, I wanted to give you, share with you some ideas that I think will help you think about where technology is moving society into the future, where technology is moving businesses into the future, but very much focused with the lens of where's e-commerce and performance marketing heading, because that's where we're all here. But I really want you to take the time in this next half an hour to also think about yourselves and where you want your roles to go, where you want your companies to go, and where you want society to go, because all that I'm going to talk about is very broad impact. Okay, so I've been an advocate and an enthusiast for futuristic technology for many, many years, but it was really pushed by people such as this guy here called Ray Kurzweil. Last year, I spent much of my time on a scholarship awarded by Google to study artificial intelligence and futuristic technology at NASA in Silicon Valley. And I was mentored by this guy called Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil, any of you heard of him? Can I have a show in this room in London for anyone? Okay, so there's one person. So Ray Kurzweil is head of special projects at Google. He's been called as a rightful heir to Thomas Edison. He's an inventor and a futurist. And he predicts that by 2045, we'll have the internet directly connected to the brain. And I'll talk to you about that a bit later on. My other mentor was a guy called Dr. Peter Diamandis, who's written a couple of really cool books called Bold and Abundance. And actually, he led to a competition that led to effectively Virgin Galactic, because the technology that emerged, the winner built technology that Virgin came in and acquired, and that's how Virgin Galactic got going. So he's a really big guy in the Silicon Valley landscape. And this is where I was. This was my view from my room on federal land space in NASA's research center called the Ames Research Center. And I kid you not, that was my view. That construction was built in the 1920s, initially to build Zeppelins, but now to hold special projects. And today, I want to really focus on, as I said, consumer marketing, e-commerce, performance marketing. But I've also talked in the title around 2 words, exponential and technology. And if I was going to leave you with anything today, it would be a much greater appreciation for what those 2 words mean, because they are super powerful and they're super subtle. So let me try and explain what they mean. First off, if we take the opposite of exponential, it would be effectively linear. So if you take 30 linear steps, you would move 30 paces. That's obvious. But if you took 30 exponential steps, doubling every time, you would travel around the planet 26 times. That's huge. Now, why is that relevant? Let's plot that as a graph. So a linear trend is a straight line, right? So constant velocity. If you take an exponential trend, it constantly rises. So you're seeing a velocity that's going up, otherwise known as acceleration. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant because as humans, we can't help but think linearly. So whenever we think into the future and we try and predict the future, we can't help but see only linearly and never exponentially. So if you think about it, think about Facebook. Could you have predicted 12 years ago the profound impact on politics it would be having 12 years later? 18 years ago, Google came about, and look how dominant it is in our lives today. The motor car, look how dominant it is in our lives today. Very, very hard for humans to predict that because they were all exponential trends. So let's play a small game. All of you, if you could all just close your eyes for a second. Have a couple of deep breaths. If you're out in Germany or if you're anywhere in the world, please play along. I want you now to picture in your mind what the world looks like 10 years from now. Now, keep your eyes closed, but raise your hands if you've got a very, very clear picture of what the world definitely looks like. Okay, so in London, I see no hands going up. Now, keep your eyes closed. I want you to picture 50 years from now, so you're all going into retirement, by the way. What does the world look like? Show of hands, any of you can tell what the world looks like? One person, amazing. That person is a genius. Open your eyes again. So it's really hard for the majority of people to be able to predict the future because in our brains, we're wired to see very, very linearly. Now, fortunately, there are a few people who are able to spot these trends into the future. And one guy who was very good at doing it was a guy called Gordon Moore. Gordon Moore, in 1965, came up with a principle called Moore's Law. Effectively, it says that every 18 months, the ratio of price to performance of transistor chips back then would double. So what does that mean? It means that every 18 months, for the same cost, you'll get double the processing power, or for the same processing power, the cost will divide by 2, right? Now, why is that relevant? That means that every 18 months, you'll have technology that's cheaper, you'll have technology that's smaller, and crucially, you'll have technology that's made available to more and more people. This guy was very, very smart. He built a company called Intel. Now, that kind of exponential trend doesn't just apply to one area. It applies to anything in the computing landscape. Take personal computers. That's been an exponential trend. Take mobile phones. You can see here in this chart that the yellow line goes up exponentially. And it will also hold true for areas such as sensors, robotics, 3D printing, all nascent technologies of today. So that's why this is so important, because the years ahead, we're going to see an explosion in technology's impact on society, because the trend is only going up. And hopefully you can see that in this curve. If you dial back to about 1900, when we had the first computing powers, which were basically punch cards, electromechanical, you can already see the dotted lines representing the dots and a trend curve representing how the exponential curve is going up. So what does this all mean for us today in our worlds? And what does this mean for the future? So I want to now shift gears and talk to you about 5 mega trends that I think are going to be really important for today and very much future gazing into the 5 years ahead. But I will also share some ideas for how you can make it real and important for your roles. The first is, you guys have already seen how voice search and voice internet has been important. It's kind of exploded in the last year as an idea. So can I have a show of hands? How many of you have got it like a Google Home or an Amazon Echo? That's amazing. I've counted over 10 people's hands. A year ago, it was like maybe 0.5 people in the room. So that's a 10 times multiple in 1 year alone. Now, in my opinion, the technology is still pretty naff. I can do some interesting things, but I can't do my shopping. I can talk to it. I can, for example, on Google Home, I can ask it for some directions. It can flick it to my TV or send me the directions to my mobile phone. Very useful, but it's not changing my life. But it has the opportunity to do that. So if we think about it, Gartner say that by 2020, 30% of browsing will be without a screen. So voice is going to be a key element of that. And if purchasing is only a small fraction of that, that's actually a huge uplift. So think about it. If by 2020 or the few years after, if this prediction is slightly out, we're going to start seeing people buying through Google Home, Amazon Echo, and the other technologies. And the way that's going to really leapfrog into the future is because of AR. So by AR, I'm not talking about virtual reality, the big clunky headsets with the big power cables that you have to carry around behind your backs with you. That technology is still a little too early, in my opinion. AR is going to be big, and it will be in the next 5 years when we get to a pair of glasses such as mine being left around on your coffee table or on your dining table that anyone in the family could pick up and wear and manifest objects right in front of them. So you could imagine in the next 5 years, a world of magical objects, and then literally talking to Google Home saying, yeah, I want to buy it. And that's not so far-fetched. If you take HoloLens, which is built by Microsoft, which is available today, it retails for about £3,000. They've done trials with several companies where you could imagine a world where you would effectively put on your glasses and you'd say, I'd like to look at this vehicle. You could get underneath the bonnet, you could open the door, you could look inside, and then effectively you could just say buy. Now, way back when mobile phones were becoming the norm, people really questioned, is it really true that people would buy a bed on a mobile phone? Now, none of us even thinks twice about the idea. This too will be very normal within the next 5 years. Many people come and ask me, well, is this really possible in terms of the technologies that need to be implemented to do this? Well, first off, a key technology in all of this is the ability to translate speech into text. And Microsoft launched a paper that showed that they'd achieved parity with a human power to do that. So effectively translating voice into text as well as a human. And WaveNet, which are part of DeepMind, actually have achieved very close to the ability to take text and translate it back into voice that sounds like a real human, not just a robot. Any of you use Google Translate? Any of you? A few people raising their hands. Try DeepMind Translate. It was launched a few weeks ago, and it's approximately about 40% better than Google Translate. Again, also launched by the same company that came up with WaveNet. So what does all this mean, and where are the opportunities? So first off, we're going to see creeping in very quietly and then suddenly everywhere, we're going to see online shopping reinvented. In the past, we moved from desktop to mobile and tablet. We're going to see another trend, and we're going to be moving to interfaces, not just screens. So it won't be heads down. It'll actually be heads up, put on a pair of glasses, and visualize or manifest objects. And the opportunities for us will be in the world of effectively playing the middleman between this voice interface and the retailer themselves or the brand. So you could imagine AR opportunities or plugging into the ecosystem such as Google Home or Amazon Echo and being an affiliate in that landscape, much more technology orientated. Anyone know what this is? Anyone? So this is the HoloLens so one gentleman knows. So this is a HoloLens from Star Trek. So in the HoloLens at Star Trek, you could manifest anything you wished for. Literally anything you could ever imagine could come true in that room. It's predicted by 5 years from now, the augmented reality in VR will be indistinguishable from the normal human sight or normal vision. So what does that actually mean? Well, here's an example of something that we can already do today, which is holoportation.
Hi, today we're going to show you an exciting new technology that could fundamentally change the way that people will communicate in the future. Imagine being able to virtually teleport from one space to another in real time. Hey Sergio,
Yes,
how does it feel like to be holoported?
it feels great to be holoported.
So if Sergio is to wear his HoloLens device, and I'm going to wear mine, we can see each other in full 3D in real time. We can interact and communicate as if we're co-present. Sergio, can you walk around my space? Can you walk behind this chair? So we're doing everything to give the impression that Sergio and I are present in the same space. Sergio, let's just do a high five. That's
Bye-bye.
great. Thank you, Sergio.
Okay, I think you get a flavor for that. Wouldn't be my choice of adjectives for feeling great by being holoported, but anyway. But if you think about it, if that can already be done today, what will it mean when AR or VR is as effective as the naked eye? So basically, you couldn't tell the difference. So potentially it means that we don't really need an office because we could sit at home and just put on some glasses, put in our earphones, and actually believe that we're at work. You don't need the tube. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't need radio anymore, so radio advertising's gone. And you don't need to live in the city because, quite frankly, you can live wherever you want. And already that's kind of happening with the nomad culture, the digital nomad culture. So things can very radically change. That'll take a little longer. So if any of you are interested, a really interesting mapping of the virtual reality and the AR technologies of the world is something called Lumascape. This is from 2016. They're launching their 2017 in about a month or so, so that might be interesting. You can also see the companies that were acquired, which gives you a sense of which technologies are particularly more impressive than others. And it's good to talk about something that happens in London. So this is a company in the advertising landscape called Kimono who come up with VR and AR ideas and concepts for brands. So they work with, for example, Nike. So a question I get asked quite often is, well, if this AR thing is going to be really big in the next 5 years, is there an opportunity for a new company to become the dominant force of tomorrow. So, in the past we had IBM that was superseded by Microsoft, who've now been superseded by the likes of Facebook and Google. But question marks around who's next. Well, first off, today, in my opinion, although Google is a larger company in terms of revenue, in my opinion, Facebook's probably the more innovative, because not only do they have their own VR and AR research base and companies, but also they have search, social, and they have bots, which I think with the landscape of AI is going to be super interesting, and I'll be talking about AI in a second. But I asked someone called Kevin Kelly, who is a co-founder of Wired, who he thought was going to be the dominant player of tomorrow. And he said it's going to be the company who's got the eyeballs of the consumers and all the data. So in his mind, it's this company. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Magic Leap. For those of you who haven't, they have received 1.4 billion in funding. That's a lot of employees, or a few people with very, very good salaries. Since 2014, they still haven't gone live, and they've made no money. But yet, Google says, who is their main investor, that they're still, super excited about what they're going to do in probably 2018. But it's companies like that who are going to have smaller glasses, still probably a little clunky, but not VR goggles, smaller glasses who are going to be able to do very, very cool things using augmented reality, who are going to probably leapfrog us all to a new paradigm of how we interact in the world and how we experience, quite possibly, even shopping. So, let me go back one. The next mega theme that I want to talk about is delegation of work to your mobile. Now, we've all heard it. We've all got mobile phones. They're great. They're a great tool, right? We use it as a tool. But we're still the instructor. We're still the master. What we're going to see is a massive shift towards using our smartphones as a partner, not just a tool. So what do I mean by that? We're starting to see nascent technology in terms of the assistants of the world, the Google Assistant, the Cortanas, the Siris of the world. Still some of them very average. Assistant from Google is probably one of the better ones. But one that I really am interested in is a company called Viv. The founders built Siri. They left. They built Viv, and they sold Viv already to Samsung. But I think it's really neat because it's an open source platform, which does lead to opportunities, which is where I believe we should all be thinking in the world of affiliate marketing. Where's the opportunity? And I think it opens a brand new ecosystem for affiliate marketing to play. So let me explain. First off, today you can use Viv and you can set up a simple rule and say, hey, pay Steve £20, and it will actually pay Steve £20. But tomorrow and very soon you'll be able to do things like find me 3 of the best rated waterproof boots under £75. Not a term that I really, waterproof boots don't excite me that much, but I need them for the weekend away. Let technology take care of it for me. Now, why is that interesting and important? Well, first off, it's going to mean more time saving for the consumer, which is what the technology companies are about. It means that price and rating is going to be more important than ever. Why is that relevant? Because it means potentially disintermediation of the retailer. So already we know that in Google Shopping, one of their concepts of the future is Google Shopping Express, where you don't even have to go to the retailer. You just buy on Google Shopping and the retailer simply posts it to you. So imagine in a world where you have this kind of assistant, you don't even need to go to the retailer's site. And that's not necessarily a good thing from our perspective, but it's good to understand what the visions could be and then look for the opportunities in those landscapes, because there will be, because we can play the intermediary in that landscape and add value for the customer experience. Some people ask me, now we're going to talk about the AI aspect of all of this. So some people say, well, this AI stuff, what does it all mean and where is it all heading? So first off, AI and the maths around it has actually been around since 1950, just so all of you know. It's been around for ages. But the challenge has been the processing power of computers is only starting to get somewhere. In around 2000, Google hired Peter Norwig, who was one of the guys who did some coaching with us last year. He came from NASA and he moved over to Google and he set up their AI division. And today, they're not hiring people to optimize their search algorithm. They're improving their systems using AI, which is pretty impressive. DeepFace, within the research arm of Facebook, have now achieved parity, or actually they're beating humans' ability to do facial recognition. That's impressive, because 4 years ago, they couldn't tell the difference between a cat and a dog. And a baby only takes 12 sightings of a cat and a dog to be able to tell the difference. They need 1 million viewings for a system to be able to tell the difference. These are massive leaps that we're seeing. But it's really important to know that these technologies aren't just for the big guys. There are companies like H2O who are democratizing data platforms for understanding deep insights using machine learning and AI. Kaggle, where you can actually pose problems and really, really smart data scientists will try and unravel your data and understand what it's saying and then tell you the answer. Emotional sensing from companies like Kairos, who are definitely used in the security space, but interestingly, even in the marketing space. So digital out of home to understand people's reactions, or even in marketing studies to get a sense of people's emotional response. And increasingly, so as you guys have already heard, we're an AI business that focuses on dynamic product bundling, something that Amazon does and 90% of retailers don't. And we've been driving a 15% revenue uplift for retailers that we work with. We're very much focused on the retail space globally. We're only just under a year old, but we're now shortlisted for 5 awards, including Best E-commerce Product of 2017. Now, I said earlier I was going to jump back to this point around connecting the brain to the internet, which when I first heard about it, I thought was nuts. But it takes crazy ideas crazy ideas today become the norm tomorrow. Think about mobile phones. One day, a long time ago, somebody would have said that was a really crazy idea. Now we all take it very much for granted. So today you've got AI mobile assistants in your pockets. It's predicted that by 2030, in my opinion, this is a little optimistic, but by 2030, you'll have nanobots, which are robots which are smaller than microscopic, that can connect to the dendrites of your brain and therefore send signals and receive signals from the Wi-Fi. If you're interested, check out a company called Neuralink. Or I'll talk to me afterwards. I could talk about it for ages. Any of you up for a slight tangent for a second? Slight tangent. This is where I kind of start talking about, we're not just talking about performance marketing, we're talking about bigger impact for all of society. So I want to give you a 2-minute masterclass in actually why is AI important for all of us to understand or just appreciate and what it means for the future. So I'm going to use the analogy of a staircase, an intelligent staircase. So as humans, we're all pretty smart. Yeah, we like to think we're pretty smart. We're top of the food chain. We're a bit smarter than chimps. Not that much more smart, but we're a bit smarter, and definitely smarter than chickens and way above ants. Okay. Today, when you think about AI is not as smart as any of us. Cognitively, I'm not even close emotionally, but cognitively, not even close to us yet. All of AI in today's landscape is themed as narrow AI, right? It solves specific problems, very cleanly defined problems. When AI becomes as intelligent as one human being, it's called artificial general intelligence. We're not there. It's predicted that by 2040, this is an average of about 100 scientists, leading scientists in the world, predict on average that by 2040, we will have artificial general intelligence, so AI being as smart as a human. But where it gets super interesting is this. Artificial super intelligence. It's predicted that by 2060, somewhere between 2060 and 2100, AI will be thousands of times smarter than us. But it's predicted in this century. And that is huge. And I think, therefore, we should all be super curious about this because it can lead to one of two extremes. One extreme, you can solve any problem that you can think of can be solved because you're going to have technology that is so intelligent it can just tell you the answer. And the ultimate question for humanity is living forever. So on the one extreme, there would be the opportunity to live forever if this technology is reached by 2060 to 2100. Think about it. That's pretty amazing to have that option. Some people may say that's wrong, right, whatever, but the option is very interesting. The other extreme is mass annihilation of all mankind. So you've got these two extremes. Now, don't worry today, but I do encourage that we should all at least have an appreciation for why is this AI thing kind of relevant? Because it's huge and it's in this century. So that's the crash course done. Let's get back on track. The next mega trend is robotics, and how robotics is going to transform consumer buying. So this was a company, I got to know these guys. They're called Fellow Robot in the US. They have got a partnership with Lowe's, the hardware store in the US. Effectively, as you walk in, it meets you, it recognizes you. If you say you're looking for a certain product, it can take you. If it's not available, it'll enable you to purchase it, and it'll be shipped to your home. Why is that so interesting? It really is a data-driven experience. It overcomes the issue of going into a store and not having someone available to help you, and it very much connects offline back to online. So think remarketing. Now, companies like Target have partnerships with a company called Simbi Robotics, who scan for price errors and also stock issues. You've obviously heard of Amazon Go, otherwise known as Amazon Steel. But that's very, very cool. I mean, they've just bought Whole Foods. So, you know, in the next couple of years, you may see this in the UK, which is very, very interesting. And have any of you heard of Beam, the telepresence technology? So a few of you are nodding. So if you go to a conference, or if you're supposed to go to a conference but you can't get there, sometimes you can get these robots to walk around. You control it with your mobile phone, and you can go and attend a conference, say hello to people. I've done it before. When I was in the US, somebody couldn't attend. He had to go home to Singapore on an emergency, and he dialed in every day, and it felt really weird because he was there, but he wasn't. So in their stores in the US, they've just abandoned having sales reps in store, and they just let all their sales reps just beam in, and they sell their products with their people beaming in from home, which is pretty cool. And also I saw my first robot security guard. Now again, you might say, is that right, wrong? You know, what about the people who used to do the job? But you certainly won't have people sleeping on the job. This is my favorite of all. If we can play the video. This is a company called Matinet. They build commercial-grade drones. They're friends of mine, and they've just had an investment last year from Mercedes into their company, and they're trying to revolutionize the world of delivery. Check this out. Cool. So that is pretty cool, right? Every time I watch that, I think it's so cool. Whilst that was happening, a patent was filed by Amazon for recharging drones on top of lampposts. So it's a crazy world. And in that craziness, there are casualties, right? So there are challenges to change. So Foxconn last year talked about replacing 60,000 factory workers in China with robots. Basically, Foxconn build the phones for the likes of Samsung and Apple. That's a big deal, right? So there are consequences, there are challenges, and that's another conversation. Happy to talk with you about that too. But I wanted you also to think about, you know, we've all, in our lifetimes, we've accepted that the likes of China is the manufacturing capital of the world. But 50 years from now, it may not be. You can have a robot in China, but you can equally have a robot where the IP resides in the UK, the US, or anywhere else in the world. And with the rise of 3D printing transforming manufacturing, you're going to see a shift away from China being the manufacturing capital of the world. Now, you can't have a futuristic talk without a driverless car, but hopefully this will be an interesting, different point. So obviously, driverless cars would mean more free time, but the likes of Uber talked about driverless cars, meaning that we would see the cost go down by 9/10. So if you go into a driverless car as a taxi, your cost will be 1/10 of what it is today. They just bought last year a company called Otto, which are driverless trucks, which, by the way, will get passed through government approval before any driverless car, because motorways are much easier to navigate for vehicles, much less likely to have accidents. So you're going to see driverless trucks before driverless cars. But if driverless trucks are cheaper to drive and transport goods, you're going to see a reduction in cost of goods sold. So to buy this shirt, it's going to cost less for the company, which means as customers, we're going to see a reduction in costs of items, which is phenomenal for shopping. So through all of this talk, I hope it's made you think a little bit bigger, and hopefully you've started to get a feel for how the impossible is starting to become possible. And so I leave you with 3 closing thoughts. These really are exponential time, and the impact of technology and society is frankly only accelerating. It does present lots and lots of opportunities, and I really want for you to think about those opportunities, but also challenges for us as a society and in organizations to overcome. Every change provides opportunities and challenges. That's just the new norm. And in all of that, timing is critical. So my thought for all of you guys is that you think about these things and you see how you can leverage this in your businesses, in your roles, and in everything that you do. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Shri. That was really fascinating. I can definitely recommend, actually, if any of you are interested in the what Shri was talking about in terms of exponentiality and how things are increasing at an increasing rapid amount of time, the Wait But Why blog has a great couple of chapters focused specifically on that subject, which break it down in a really kind of informative and interesting manner. So that's definitely one to check out. Do any of you have any questions for Shri or for ourselves? Yes. Oh, actually, before you do, Anna, I think we do have a mic somewhere, just so that people that are streaming, you're going to be loud. Okay.
Gosh. So thank you very much for your talk. I think it was absolutely amazing. I've learned quite a few things. I have 2 questions. So the first one is that I want to know more about what exactly your company is doing and how we can work together in affiliate channel. And my second question is regarding the robots. So I've seen very optimistic forecast. But about a month ago, I went to the Science Museum. There was a robots exhibitions, the best robots that we currently have. And I was really excited to go there. But once I arrived, I've seen that all these robots could do is just to climb 3 stairs, for example, or not reacting at all to what I was saying, or saying the same line over and over again. And it was very interesting thing for me to understand why these robots are not doing anything. There was about 50 of them. I don't know, maybe some of you guys went to these robot, but I think the technology that's currently available, people are not working together to actually create one robot. So for example, Siri, right? We can actually communicate with this device and it can send me back some information. But these robots couldn't do anything at all. Is it the reason for that because of the patent? So for example, people who created this Siri technology, they don't really want to go to Honda, who has actually created Corps for robots. So how do you see that? So these specific companies, they create something amazing, but they don't work together to produce that amazing one robot. Or what exactly the reason behind with that these best robots that are currently available not doing anything at all? So these 2 questions. Thank you.
So in terms of working together, let's talk later on. Absolutely, I'll be around to answer any questions from anyone. And in terms of your second question, why is the technology a bit naff? There are a couple of reasons. First off, you're absolutely right. Patents and companies saying, well, I'm not just going to tell you how we did it. That happens everywhere. The second reason is that, you know how I talked about in today's world for using artificial intelligence, it's still deemed as narrow AI. Narrow meaning it solves very specific problems. So, you know, for example, let's just take a robot that can walk. In fact, there are robots that are very good at walking and running. You just didn't happen to see them there. But there are technology robots that are amazing at running. I can happily share with you some links later on. But there's so many things they can't do. And that's just because the technology is still very nascent. So it comes back to this concept of narrow and actually saying, well, actually, let's just go back to a specific business problem and then let's look to solve it and let's find a solution. To have a robot that's all singing, all dancing and that understands us, we're still millions of light years away from that. And another key component of that is something called understanding empathy. That in technology speak, that's a field called effective computing. And still, that's even more nascent than other technologies that I've talked about today. So technology to understand and have empathy for us is still even way more behind.
Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, if you give it a second.
So going back to when you were talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, in the affiliate space, how do you see that being utilized? And will affiliates require developer skills, coding, orientated language skills? What would be your opinion on that?
Yeah. So I think about it in terms of the way I think about it is I'd say think about the ecosystems first off. So if we're in the ecosystem of, for example, let's say we're in the ecosystem of Google Home, and we want to, as affiliates, enable a add value between the retailer here and the customer who's going to be using Google Home for voice. Well, if we then say build AR technology, that's one way. Another way is AR technology already exists, and we provide a layer in between, which might be pure software. It may not have to be augmented reality based. It may be just another layer. So, for example, increasingly, we're a layer that sits in between, right? But we add value. In today's landscape, you've got an affiliate, perhaps a publisher who's a voucher code site. They're a layer in between. So we need to identify the ecosystem at play and then say, where's a gap that we can fill and add value? So it may mean AR technology skills, but it might just be software skills, the traditional online software skills.
Great. Any other questions at all? No? Well, good. Like I said at the start, your copies of the Awin Report are just available on the table over there, so please help yourselves on your way out. And thank you very much for coming along today.